Hello, welcome to Pensions in 10 with me, David Brooks, on my own again this week. So this time, as per usual, I've got 5 things to go through. It tends to be 5 when I'm on my own. Some quite big stuff. So we've got a precursor to the Pensions Commission. Some data has just come out this morning from DWP, so I'll talk you through some of the highlights of that. Updated longevity stats and what that means for pensions and savers. The influence or the finfluence of TikTokers and financial influencers. Pensions dashboard, just a little update on where we are with the dashboard. There was a sneaky update last week, so I want to just make sure people are clear on what's going on with the deadlines. And finally, tax and scammers and what's happening with the concerns around IHT. So the first story is some stats on a study that DWP have just released, life courses and pension savings. So they're looking at sort of people's working lives, type of work they do, full-time, part-time, self-employed, unemployed, and the impact this has on their ability to save into a pension. There's loads of stats in there, so I'm not going to go through all the facts and figures, all the numbers, and it's too soon. I haven't been able to digest them all. But just reading through it, a few things clearly leap out when you're looking at this and thinking about the impacts on pension saving, and also as I'm talking, how sort of half ahead on the Pensions Commission, which is looking at gender gaps and working patterns and how they impact pension saving, as well as cultural issues. So there's lots of stats in here that will be feeding through and could be reflected in the report from that Pensions Commission too. So some of the big takeaways. So basically, working life is a massive dominant factor of your retirement income. So if you're in full-time employment, and then this is where the auto-enrollment comes through, there's a high chance you'll have been auto-enrolled. There's a high chance you'll be saving in a pension. Those with career breaks, part-time, there's a far lower level of pensions wealth. So this inequality is already in the system. Auto-enrollment has been a great success in one hand of helping people that are in employment to save for their retirement, but not so good if you're self-employed. If you're earning less than that inequality there is you'll be paying less into your pension, becomes baked into the system. The big one that's come out and has got some headlines this morning in the Nationals is around the sort of motherhood penalty. So how that feeds into the gender gap, and there's some stats in there around how males and females saving patterns diverge shortly before, but more significantly after the birth of a child. So while men's sort of pension savings rates do this and then go up after the birth of a child, the mothers will sort of dip just slightly before. Presumably, people are saving or changing their savings habits shortly before the retirement, and then there's a bigger dip after the birth, and then they come up, but they don't ever quite get as high as the male average. So this is quite a serious indicator of why we see this pensions gap with gender. So, but again, it's back to sort of working life issues, not just pensions. Pensions themselves are kind of quite static, and you have your different contribution rates, but it's how you interact with your working life and how that interacts with your savings is the important bit. And so people are coming back part time, obviously having period off as well. And there are rules around how pension savings contributions have to remain at the salary that the mother was on before they went off on maternity leave, things like this. But still, it's recovery, and it's people taking part-time work while they're caring, and basically compromising their career to raise their child, which is of course understandable, but it does have an effect on pensions. And if you're looking at this from a pensions saving lens, then that is an issue. A couple of the little things, life events matter indirectly but not directly. So there's a marriage, divorce, they're harder to sort of quantify. And household income as well as an issue, which can mask the individual risk. So there's a lot of the stats, a lot of the analysis is based on two people living together and having an income together. But individuals, if you're on your own, then things can be a lot harder for you as well, and that can hide that vulnerability around divorce and bereavement and what happens in those situations as well. So really interesting stats. Obviously, like I say at the top, this is going to feed into the Pensions Commission. We're expecting a report in the spring. We are in spring. So we're expecting some things to come through on that soon. So that's interesting. Second thing that's interesting and that gets people thinking is ONS and the CMI updated longevity stats came out last week. And you can go onto the link and type in your date of type in your age and your gender, and you can be told, how likely you are to get to 190 state pension age and things like this. And from this, there's been some analysis, some very high level analysis, but in a sense, longevity is broadly back to the pre-pandemic levels. So there's been a dip, but we're getting back to what that was. However, we are behind where people thought we would be back in 2011, because a lot of the work that the CMI does, the Continuous Mortality Investigation Group, can't remember what that I was, but it probably is that. What they're doing is obviously they're supporting pension schemes work out how much money they're going to need into the future. So what they try to do is project how improvements to longevity will feed through society, through the lifespan of a pension scheme. So obviously that's very important when you're assessing your risk, for your longevity risk in your scheme. What they were saying in 2011 was things were going to be a lot better than they are now, basically. So that's interesting, and it's notable that we're not, things aren't getting as good as they thought, as fast as they thought they would. However, things are good. I think it's fair to say, if you look at the stats in there, on average, a lot of people are hitting state pension age now. It used to be, if you go back 25, 30 years, a significant minority wouldn't make it state pension age, but it's now 9 out of 10 people, broadly speaking, going to make it to state pension age. And obviously that becomes a big issue for policymakers when they're looking at the state pension, because obviously a lot more people are going to get it, so it's going to cost a lot more money. But also, at the other end of that, people are living longer in retirement, and so that state pension can be paid out for longer. But that can be mapped onto personal savings as well. So obviously, if you're living longer, you're going to need more money set aside to live on into your later life. So, good news, retirement is becoming, at least state retirement as well, is becoming more universal, but that does put pressure, on our system. Interesting though, and also Dr. Susie Morrissey is also working on a review of state pension age, and so again, this is important when that feeds into that analysis. We're expecting something on that relatively soon as well, so that is interesting and notable. Okay, my next story was reported in the Pensions Age actually, but it was around research that showed that 90% of financial content from Finfluencers, so financial influencers, is of low quality. Trying to look, I don't see myself as a Finfluencer. I'm just a bloke waffling on LinkedIn and on a Broadstone website. But there's a lot of stuff out there. You see a lot of TikTokers talking about investments and pensions and housing and all this sort of stuff. I dip in every now. I don't have a TikTok account. I don't really understand it. But from what I have seen, sometimes it comes through into our world, and it is pretty low quality. Big issues. There are no disclaimers. Another big issue is about a third of people act on some of these influencers' advice, and assessing the credibility by the comments. And we know comments can't always be trusted. Bots will get in there and big up the speaker. That doesn't happen to my videos, but sometimes bots will get in there and big up the videos. So this is a big issue. It's a big issue for, we have an advice gap. We already know that people aren't taking advice when we would like them to make these big decisions. And so this gap is being sort of filled. I think it's at the younger end, but it will always go up, I think. So this unregulated content, entertainment, sort of, bite-sized, click-sharey, clickbaity type stuff. It's not really made to give sound financial advice. It's there to make people, have an emotional reaction to something, or feel like they're being ripped off, or feel like there's a get-rich-quick scheme out there that they can actually, make some money. These kind of things, similar to the sort of scammer stuff. I'll come on to that in a minute. But it's very difficult. Can we fight it with better content? Probably. One issue I have is, as a pensions industry, we're not very good at doing things in a bite-sized way. The regulation will come on and you'll have to say certain things, and you have to make sure you phrase things in a particular way to almost protect yourself. If you're out there giving this advice and you're a regulated entity, unregulated entities can kind of do what they want. Where's the comeback if people don't, follow all your advice and then don't get the outcome that they expected? So platform providers, regulators should probably be doing more. Will they do more? I doubt it. To be honest, I doubt it. It feels like a Wild West, and I don't really know what people can do about that kind of space at the moment. It's a bit depressing, I suppose, but this is a big issue, and it's probably only going to get bigger. I was going to do the tax and scammers last, but it feels like that fits with this, because those who aren't subscribed, you should subscribe to Which. They do a weekly sort of scam, fraud alert email, which is really good. And then a recent one, they were talking about how inheritance tax is creating uncertainty and fear. People don't like, to feel like they're going to get, or their beneficiaries are going to get tax charges. And it's confusing. The IHT rules are quite complex, and the way it works are quite complicated. HMRC have done some recent, further information on that, and that is pretty complicated how it's all going to work. And this is a fertile space for scammers. So they're warning people to be aware of scams where people are going to be feeding off that fear and saying, "Oh, we can help you avoid that inheritance tax, or we can help you protect your beneficiaries from any downside. Do this, invest in this." There'll be lots of things about so-called trusts that could be set up and these kind of things, and so many of these things don't work. They're not legitimate routes to reduce your inheritance tax liability, and potential is that you will get scammed out of the pension even before you pass away. So and loopholes around overseas transfers. This stuff is a big issue. So again, if you're a trustee listening to this, this is always good to keep up to date with. Actually, one of my trustees alerted me to these witch emails. They're really good, and I would recommend you signing up to those. And if any things you can see that you can trickle down to your members to help them protect themselves, I think would be a good thing. So my last story is just a bit of clarity on Pensions Dashboard and when that's going to be available to the general public, because it sort of is up and running at the moment. So I just want to give you an update in the sense that 31st of October is still the connection deadline. So all eligible schemes will have to connect by 31st of October, and there's lots of schemes going through that process now. Summer is going to be very busy connecting those last few schemes, but they'll all be connected by the 31st of October 2026. That isn't the date when the general public will be able to get onto it. We're still going through testing. The Pension Dashboard Programme, Money Helper, they're all going through the testing at the moment to try to make sure that the data is shown in the most appropriate way, the caveats, the clarifications, how you get further support, all that sort of stuff works. So they're going through, testing is ramping up at the moment. One important thing is the PDP updated one of their frequent asked questions around when it would be available, and they said their expectation is that it will be available in the financial year 2027 to 2028. So that's April 27 to sort of March 28, around that period. So it's good for the industry to understand that is likely to be when it's going to be available to members. We obviously don't know when. There's been no announcement from the Pensions Minister. This isn't an official deadline. This is just purely, this is their current planning. This is currently where they are. And this isn't being shown as some sort of delay. This is probably where most people thought it would happen. Those that work on the those who work not on the program, but those who work, within the industry thinking about this, this was probably where most of us thought it could be. Obviously, it would be quite politically exciting for the minister to be able to stand up on 31st of October, 1st September and say 90% or whatever it will be of the pensions industry and users are connected to the dashboard. And within 6 months from this day, it'll be available to members. That would be a nice that'd be quite exciting for the minister to do. I don't know if they'll be able to do that because of the position with the testing and the current designing that needs to go on to get it ready to launch. But that would be, the earliest time. And then we can all take political judgments of when it might be advantageous to make those announcements as time goes on. Obviously, I think we'd all prefer the industry announcement. I don't want an announcement on the 1st of December because effectively I lose a month of planning because people aren't really going to be working for a couple of weeks or so around Christmas. January is always a busy time as well. So, as an industry, we could think, when would we actually like it to be announced? There's going to be no perfect time. Somebody would always complain, but December wouldn't be great. But anyway, so we're still waiting for the formal announcement, but we're getting a little bit more clarity of where we are. Okay, there's 5 quick stories. I feel like I've overrun. There's a big red clock above my head and I can see it's a big number. But thank you for sticking with it. I hope you enjoy these videos. If you do enjoy them, please like them. If you see it on LinkedIn, give it a little share so more friends and contacts and colleagues can see it. If you want to get these in your inbox, then you can go to the Broadstone website and click on Pensions in 10, and there's a subscribe button. And you can give us your email address. We will only use it for Pensions in 10 videos. We don't send you anything else if you sign up there. And you can join these in your inbox on Wednesday. All right, thanks very much, and I'll see you on the next Pensions in 10.